Here is something that almost never happens in modern geopolitics. The most powerful man on earth publicly dismisses an entire country's diplomatic team as people nobody has ever heard of. He cancels his own envoy's trip. He tells the world he will handle everything by phone. And then, within hours, that same country's top diplomat boards a plane, flies to a neutral country to meet its head of state, boards another plane, and lands right back in the city where the talks were supposed to happen, without being invited, without American negotiators present, and without asking anyone's permission. That is what happened this weekend, and what it reveals about the real balance of power in this war, about who actually has leverage, and about how close or how far the world is from the most dangerous energy catastrophe in modern history, is something you need to understand completely. Because by the end of this video, you are going to see this conflict in a way that the headlines are not showing you. Let's go back to Saturday afternoon, because that is where this story truly begins. Trump was boarding Air Force One in Palm Beach, Florida. Reporters gathered at the tarmac. He had just posted on Truth Social that Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff would not be flying to Pakistan for the second round of Iran peace talks. He gave his reason publicly and bluntly. Too much travel, 16 hours on airplanes going back and forth. Not worth it for a proposal that was not good enough. And then, speaking directly to reporters before stepping onto the plane, Trump said something that landed like a thunderclap across every foreign ministry in the world. He said he was not going to send his people to Pakistan to meet with people nobody has ever heard of. Nobody has ever heard of. Those 5 words, directed at the diplomatic team of a nation of 92 million people, a nation that has been fighting the United States military for nearly 2 months, a nation whose foreign minister has a PhD in international relations and has been one of Iran's most senior diplomats for over a decade. Those 5 words were not a slip of the tongue. They were a deliberate, calculated act of public humiliation designed to project American dominance and frame Iran's negotiators as irrelevant. And Iran's response to that humiliation was not anger. It was not a military escalation. It was not a threatening statement from the IRGC. It was something far more disciplined, far more strategic, and in its own way, far more powerful. Abbas Araghchi got back on a plane. Now let me tell you who Abbas Araghchi actually is, because Trump said nobody has ever heard of him, and that framing deserves a direct answer. Araghchi is Iran's foreign minister. He holds a PhD in international relations from the University of Kent in the United Kingdom. He has been a senior Iranian diplomat for more than 20 years. He was one of the key architects of the 2015 JCPOA nuclear deal, the agreement that took years of negotiation between Iran and 6 world powers, including the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Russia, and China. He has sat across the table from American secretaries of state. He has negotiated in Vienna, in Geneva, in New York, in Lausanne. He speaks fluent English and French. He is not an unknown. He is one of the most experienced nuclear negotiators on earth. And this weekend, while Trump was calling him nobody, Araghchi was meeting the Sultan of Oman, one of the most strategically significant mediators in the entire Middle East, and then flying back to Pakistan for a second round of consultations with mediators who are actively trying to end a war that has already killed thousands of people and shut down 20% of the world's oil supply. The contrast between how Trump described him and what he was actually doing in those same hours is one of the most revealing moments of this entire conflict. Let's talk about the Oman stop, because it is not a minor detail. It is the center of the story. Oman has a unique and irreplaceable role in U.S.-Iran diplomacy that goes back decades. It was Omani back channels that helped lay the groundwork for the 2015 nuclear deal. When Washington and Tehran cannot talk directly, they have historically talked through Muscat. The Sultan of Oman, Haitham bin Tariq, has maintained friendly relations with both the United States and Iran simultaneously, a diplomatic tightrope that almost no other government in the world can walk. When Araghchi flew to Muscat on Saturday and met the Sultan directly, he was not just paying a courtesy visit. He was activating the most trusted back channel in the history of U.S.-Iran relations. He was delivering a message to Oman to carry to Washington. He was asking Oman to communicate Iran's position to American officials in a way that bypasses the public insult of Trump's tarmac comments and creates space for a deal to emerge without either side having to visibly back down. And then, having done all of that in a matter of hours, he flew back to Islamabad on Sunday. Iranian state media reported his return. He is in Pakistan right now. America's negotiators are in Washington. And the diplomatic architecture Araghchi is building this weekend, Islamabad, Muscat, Islamabad again, is a message to the world that Iran is not waiting for America to decide when diplomacy is convenient. Now let's talk about what Iran said this morning, because it is the most important statement of this entire conflict, and it is not receiving the attention it deserves. Tehran announced that the Strait of Hormuz will under no circumstances return to its previous state, not after a ceasefire, not after a deal, not after sanctions are lifted. Under no circumstances will the Strait of Hormuz go back to what it was before February 28, 2026. This is a declaration of permanent geopolitical transformation. For decades, the free passage of roughly 20% of the world's oil and 20% of the world's liquefied natural gas through the Strait of Hormuz was treated as a global constant, one of the fixed facts of the international economic order, as reliable as the tides. Iran is now saying explicitly that that era is over. Iran's parliament speaker, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, made the same point in even more direct language earlier this week when he said Iran has not destroyed the enemy, but has strategically defeated them. He was describing the seizure of the world's most important maritime choke point as a permanent geopolitical achievement. Iran has demonstrated to itself and to every government and military strategist on earth that it can close the Strait of Hormuz and hold it closed for months. And Tehran is now declaring that whatever agreement eventually ends this war, the world will have to negotiate a new normal for Hormuz, one in which Iran has a recognized say over who passes and under what conditions. This is why the phone call between Trump and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer this morning was so significant. Downing Street published a readout of that call, and the language it used was uncommonly blunt for official diplomatic communications. Starmer told Trump directly that the Hormuz crisis is creating severe consequences for the global economy and for the cost of living of people in the United Kingdom. That readout also noted that the two leaders discussed the urgent need to get shipping moving again. Urgent need. Those are not the words a government uses when it thinks a problem is manageable. Those are the words a government uses when it is watching its domestic economy take damage it cannot absorb indefinitely. The United Kingdom imports a significant portion of its liquefied natural gas from the Gulf. British shipping companies are paying war risk insurance premiums that have made many routes economically unviable. British consumers are paying more for fuel, more for food, more for everything that arrives by ship. And Starmer, who has been broadly supportive of American policy on Iran, is now calling Trump directly to say the economic pain is becoming politically unsustainable. He is not the only one. European governments across the continent are watching the same dynamic. Asian economies that depend on Gulf oil, Japan, South Korea, India, are burning through emergency reserves and rerouting supply chains at enormous cost. The Hormuz crisis stopped being a Middle East story weeks ago. It is now a global cost of living crisis that is hitting households in London and Tokyo and Seoul and Mumbai in ways that have nothing to do with the rights and wrongs of Iran's nuclear program. And yet here is the paradox that defines this moment. Iran is under extraordinary economic pressure too. Trump posted this week that Iran is losing $500 million a day. The U.S. naval blockade has redirected 37 ships as of Saturday. Iran's oil storage at Karg Island is approaching capacity limits. Iranian markets are in crisis. The currency has collapsed. Basic goods like chicken, rice, eggs, and medicine have tripled or quadrupled in price in Tehran markets. Internet connectivity is at 2% of normal after 55 straight days of blackout. And Iran's leadership is simultaneously dealing with more than 3,400 of its citizens killed since the war began. Nobody is winning this war cleanly. Both sides are bleeding, and yet both sides are projecting maximum confidence publicly while quietly keeping every possible diplomatic channel open. Iran says the war will under no circumstances leave Hormuz unchanged, but sends its foreign minister on a two-country diplomatic sprint in a single weekend. Trump says he has all the cards and Iran has none, but gets on the phone with the British Prime Minister about the urgent need to reopen the strait. The public statements and the private actions of both governments are pointing in completely different directions. And that gap between what each side is saying and what each side is actually doing is where the deal, if it ever comes, will be found. Let's zoom into the Lebanon dimension of today's story because it adds another layer of danger to an already overloaded situation. Israel launched strikes in southern Lebanon on Saturday that killed at least 6 people. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ordered what his office described as forceful attacks on Hezbollah targets, accusing the group of sabotaging the ceasefire. Lebanon's state news agency reported strikes in multiple towns across the Bint Jbeil and Tyre and Nabatea districts. Hezbollah said it was responding with its own operations targeting Israeli army vehicles in southern Lebanon. The Israel-Lebanon ceasefire that was brokered by the United States and extended just days ago is fracturing visibly in real time. The death toll in Lebanon since March the 2nd has now climbed to at least 2,496 people killed, according to Lebanon's Public Ministry of Health, a steep jump from the previous official count. And this is happening simultaneously with the Iran-US standoff over Hormuz, the collapse of the Pakistan talks, and Iran's declaration that the strait will never return to normal. Two parallel conflicts, both involving Iranian-backed forces, both under American-brokered ceasefires that neither side is fully respecting, both escalating at the same time. The strategic connection between them is direct. Hezbollah is Iran's most powerful proxy. Every time Israel hits Hezbollah harder, it gives Iran's hardliners more domestic justification for maintaining the Hormuz blockade and refusing to make concessions at the negotiating table. The wars are not separate. They are feeding each other. There is one more detail from today that deserves attention because it captures the sheer global scale of what the Hormuz crisis has become. The United States government this week proposed, through a special envoy, that Iran's spot at the 2026 World Cup, which is scheduled to be held in the United States, Mexico, and Canada starting in June, should be given to another country. FIFA rejected the idea. Iran has not withdrawn. The Iranian national football team is reportedly still training and preparing to play its group stage matches in California and Washington state. Think about what that means. The United States is at war with Iran. American and Israeli forces have struck Iranian nuclear facilities. The U.S. Navy has blockaded Iranian ports and seized Iranian ships. And in June, Iranian footballers are scheduled to walk onto a field in California in front of tens of thousands of fans. No one knows if that will actually happen. But the fact that it is even a live question, the fact that the 2026 World Cup schedule is now part of the geopolitical conversation around the Iran war, tells you something about the surreal, unprecedented, boundary-breaking nature of this moment in history. The old rules about how wars are fought, how diplomacy works, how international sporting events are separated from military conflicts, all of those rules are being rewritten right now, in real time, one bizarre twist at a time. So where does that leave us tonight, Sunday, April 26, 2026, as Araghchi sits in Islamabad without a single American counterpart in the same city? It leaves us in a moment of maximum uncertainty that contains simultaneously the highest risk of escalation and the most active diplomatic maneuvering of this entire conflict. Iran's foreign minister is in Pakistan. Trump is in Washington taking phone calls from allied leaders who are frightened about the global economy. The Strait of Hormuz is still effectively closed. Iran has declared it will never fully reopen on the old terms. 37 ships have been turned back by the U.S. Navy. Mines are still in the water. A 6-month clearing operation waits on the other side of any ceasefire. Lebanon is escalating. Gaza food prices are 85% higher than before this war began. And somewhere between a tarmac insult about people nobody has ever heard of and a determined foreign minister flying Oman to Pakistan in a single Sunday, the fate of the global energy economy is being decided. Trump said nobody has ever heard of these people. Araghchi came back anyway. And that gap between American contempt and Iranian persistence is where the next chapter of this war will be written. Drop your answer in the comments right now. Do you think Trump's decision to skip the Pakistan talks and handle everything by phone is a power move that will force Iran into a better deal, or is it the biggest diplomatic mistake of this entire war? And do you believe Iran's declaration that Hormuz will never return to normal is a negotiating position or a permanent new reality for the global economy? Tell us exactly what you think below, because this conversation is more important than anything else happening in the world right now.